Hi, my name is Sabu Francis. I'm an architect and I'm also a software developer and a researcher and a teacher. I'm from India. Uh, I'm the author of TAD, a pretty old design software which I have now let loose on the internet. It is a freeware available from 2017. I plan to open source it very soon as I am able to shift all my source code into a more compatible language for or languages for open source projects. Recently, I've been participating in some discussions at OSR.com. A couple of friends over there they have been asking me to join, and I'm finally there. I kind of feel like Rip Van Winkle, waking up from my sleep and looking around and seeing, my God, a lot of things have been happening there. So Indians have this tendency to hold the holistic together, like we say here. Buddha keeps smiling in the middle. Like, instead of taking very sharp positions, we want to see and look around what is going on. So I created this mind map, which you can see in front of you, which hopefully will create which will give an overview of the landscape of how all various people who are making various forays into software in architecture. And it's mainly I'm doing it to reduce my confusion, but I hope that it will help others also who are there in this particular area. At the onset, let me tell you one thing. I am not really from academic background, so some of the points which I'm talking here may look as if I'm preaching to the choir, so pardon me for that, but sometimes it is useful for putting out everything together, even if it is very obvious that this is how things are. And I invite all of you, actually, to whoever is listening to this, so email me at I'll just write that down here. Email me at this particular email address, and you can I can share this mind map with you and make you a collaborator on this mind map. So please email me if you find that this resonates with you and you think that you need to contribute to this, and I will add you into this particular document. So on one side you have problems, and the other side you have the various solutions which are emerging in this particular area of software in architecture. I am obviously a biased person because I've written my own design software, and I've been stoutly maintaining it and promoting it, and I'm hoping that people will adopt it. Nevertheless, I've tried my level best to reduce my biases and lay out the land in this mind map in as much nuances I could find. There are some very interesting approaches which I saw on OSR.com. And of course, we all know, whoever is involved in this particular area, that there are some very fascinating approaches. I have a kind of a tendency to sometimes slow down and sometimes really speed up. A lot of my coding is very fast, but a lot of my thinking is pretty slowly. Anyway, so here we are. So under problems, I've identified two broad concerns. There are technology concerns, and there are what I call as society concerns, the soft issues around any problem will have issues of society and humanity and all that. So let me first describe this part, then I will open up this part, the solutions part. So the societal concerns are the things which are very pressing and immediate right now, which we need to all worry about. At least I believe that these are things which we need to worry about. And there are future ones. Now again, I have divided this, like I told earlier, this is a mind map, and this particular mind map does not allow you to close loops as such. So there may be some blurring of boundaries, and there may be things which should have been in this category and not that category, or probably something which should have been in both the categories. But I'm sure that is all pardonable. Like for example, practice and theoretical is actually one and the same in one sense. Whatever the theoreticians talk about, eventually this way, that way, would end up in practice. But for convenience, I have kind of divided as practice concerns and theoretical concerns which have not yet got into practice, but they are reasonably immediate also. Under practice, what I've noticed, especially from the point of view of what's happening in India, is one is to respect all kinds of starting points when designing. Designing is not a one size fit all concern. When we design a piece of architecture, you can never know from which point you can start, and India being a vast country with multicultural and lots of languages and lots of viewpoints, and it's actually quite a interesting area to be, because I feel if you solve something for India, I probably have solved it for quite a lot of the world also, because of the kind of context which we are in. And when I practice as an architect, I find very strange situation. There was a time when I had to do a resort, a mountain resort, and I was at that place. We had to travel quite a distance. I mean, India is quite a vast country, and I traveled for about 24 hours by car and finally reached that place, and I had only 2 hours over there. And the thing which first struck me is that such a beautiful place. It is on a mountainside down south in Kerala, and I had to capture the view, so I was going around like a cinematographer, capturing views. Okay, there is a view here of the mountain and view here, and what appeared in the TAD model first were the actually window openings, without no clue about where the openings would go. So the starting point in that particular case were window openings, and nothing much more than that, because the client had not given the brief fully that time. Anyway, unfortunately that project did not take off. There were some other litigations and things like that, and it almost immediately got discarded, so it never really went ahead. But that was a very, very unusual starting point which as an architect I had to encounter. So you find all kinds of starting points. You will have starting points where there are some religious beliefs here, which is called Vastu Shastra. You must have heard of Feng Shui, probably that's more famous, but in India there's something called Vastu Shastra. And there are times when husband and wife will come to my office and they would first want to know the Vastu Shastra concerns before anything else. And you can't say no, because it's their point of view. We have to show empathy, right? So we need intelligent design assistance right across. This has been seriously pressing, because obviously talent and intelligence is not geography related. So if I start an office at a particular location, it doesn't mean that only the intelligent people will surely come and join me there. So that's a big problem actually. We have all kinds of constructions and materials, and we have a lot of traditional workmanship and craftsmanship, passed down generations in the family, and many of them are not even literate. Many of them can't even read or drawing, but they know how to construct a beautiful wooden jali. For example, jali is a grill work, trellis work. So you have all kinds of situations which is at the construction level, but even traditionally at the design level, there are lots of stories. India has got a very huge history of architecture and construction. Literally, there are some monuments and all which goes thousands of years back, and some of them are actually still in use today. So there's a whole lot of things which we need to talk about. Making money while making sense, I don't think I need to elaborate on that. And technical communication, that we need to really communicate whatever we are doing, so that it really becomes at least we don't introduce additional distortions when you're communicating with other stakeholders and other people involved in the technology of developing a piece of architecture. Theoretical concerns which are immediately what I can think of is, like, I feel this is a very pressing issue, but it requires a fair amount of theoretical backdrop, which I'm probably not equipped to fully give an answer, and I'm sure there are a lot more theoretical concerns. But one thing which is seriously pressing is the social responsibility of archiving knowledge. This actually is very bothersome, and the last 30 years I've been wondering that architecture and is one field where we are actually the fountainhead of new knowledge, right? Every piece of work which an architect does is an invention, and because it never was done before, right? So, and all inventions are additional inputs into the corpus of knowledge which we have. So there is this fountainhead called architecture, which is continuously spewing of new knowledge. And many times architects kind of say, okay, we have done my work, bye bye, I'm going away, and that's the end of it. Whatever happens to it happens to it. If you want, you can see some drawings here and there, and but that's crazy. I mean, you look at any other field, you look at musicians. I mean, you can play back 600, 700-year-old music in the music notation, maybe even earlier. So those are the immediate concerns. There are future concerns again to do with practice. I see things coming up in remote collaboration, huge participation of the stakeholders. So it won't be just the architects taking a design decision. There will be and not just government body making a token gesture, but there will be actually society at large. Things like blockchain and all is allowing people to democratize the way we take decisions, and then you will have a time when people will open out their design activity and say, okay, come take a look, this is how it is going on, do you want to have anything to say here? You will have a lot of legal issues, because how do you handle copyrights when multiple people are participating? I mean, these are all going to come up and bite you in the backside in your practice for sure once all this starts coming up. Architects definitely need an additional source of revenues. When I wrote this, I thought I should have probably put it in under immediate rather than here, because one of the peculiarities of being a good architect is that that's a kind of a underlying statement which nobody speaks, but everybody knows. When we architects get together, we kind of know that architect is able to do whatever he can do because he actually has an additional source of income. So architectural practice is really very messy and slow, and it can tax the most patient of people, most modest people. 3 years, 4 years is what a project can take, and then you find that all kinds of shenanigans have happened and you didn't get the project. I didn't get that resort project, which I really feel sore about. So additional sources of revenues will become a lot important, especially now in COVID times. This is becoming pretty glaring actually. Theoretical concerns, there will be because of automation which will come in, robotic arms and all kinds of new ways of constructing. There will be this moral question of where do you divide the labor between automation and humans, and how do you know whether something should be automated at all to begin with, or are we doing vicarious automation? Integration with other branches, this also probably is an immediate concern. I'm not sure. Today when my friend was telling, he did a 1-year stint at Johns Hopkins in the US. He's a doctor, and when he went there, he said that there is nothing wrong. And when I went to my class, I found that I was probably the only doctor over there, and he was doing something in medicine, being a doctor. And the other people were engineers and sociologists and artists. They were the people who were in Johns Hopkins. So the intermingling of various different fields are already very much there. If you go to any conference today, any theoretical conference, it will not be surprising to see in a mathematical conference some artists also there and things like that. So but underneath that, there has to be a framework for communicating across branches, because there's a lot of interconnections which is happening. And I told you, this is one of the characteristics of in India. We connect everything steely to everything else and make a big mess of it, but hopefully something nice will come out. So those are the social concerns. Technology concerns, again, let me warn you, I may be preaching to the choir here. The biggest one is, of course, we all want to have one central source of truth. That is the one central model which models architecture. And my addition to that is architecture modeling is not one stable thing at the BIM level, but it morphs, and each stage has got its own modeling peculiarities. I often compare it with cooking, where in the initial stages of cooking you have to pour water, and then water boils off. So the model at that stage would contain that water, but the model at the stage when the food is already cooked will have another set of requirements. Now, this may quickly become a strawman argument and a false analogy, but if you really look at our field of architecture, you will find that we do need to have some cogent method to put everything together, ideally in one place. Today, we have one modeling for visualization, another one for acoustics, another one for whatever, electrical analysis or whatever. The second one is, of course, architecture is a huge big data problem. It's massive. I sometimes get very surprised with the computer science guys, because I straddle that field also. I've taught computer science, and when they talk about big data, I say, come here. I'll show you what big data really is when you talk about a building. And the strange thing is that, on one hand we say that the quality of something changes if the size of that thing changes. And here I am seeing a trend, especially in BIM, where it started with certain observations inside, say, mechanical engineering. You're lovingly creating one machine part or a gasket or whatever, or maybe even a whole engine, a car engine or a jet engine. And then you take all those underlying concepts and just expand it to fit a building, and that's crazy. I mean, how come you are not applying that logic that the entire logistics changes, the way the particular data has to handle this to change? Not just that, it's not just that it's a static big data. I mean, and a piece of architecture is like a huge absorbent, right? It's continuously absorbing more and more information as time passes. It's not just the building material which goes into it and all that. The other thing which is a very important concern, and which is probably a topic which is there not just in the field of architecture but in many other areas, like in AI there is this issue of soft AI and hard AI. Similarly in architecture there is this issue of determinism and non-determinism. For some reason it's assumed that non-deterministic things are anathema. I mean, let's not go there. Let's not go there at all. But the thing is that maybe you can't go there. I understand maybe computer algorithms may not be able to go into non-deterministic issues, but then that doesn't mean that problem is not there. It is very much there. There are certain things which get prioritized, whether that architect likes it or not, and he still has to do a reasonably good job of it. Problem of infinite regress is like going into a barber shop and seeing infinite images in all the mirrors over there, one mirror in front of you, one mirror behind you. So modeling is many times a decision of which part of the world around is in the model and which part is not. And then you say, oh, you know what, that part is not there, let me go into the real world, pick up that part, bring it into the model. That approach will quickly become this hall of mirrors, and you'll have an infinite regress where you're going to and fro, and you find that whole model has become so huge that then you wonder how are you going to handle that, because that itself has become probably as complex as the real world itself. The other thing which comes time and again in a very messy practice in architecture, is what I call as a just-in-time modeling. You have the theoretician modeler who worked out on software, it's all nice, elegant, clean, everything is nice, hunky-dory, and then suddenly the client's wife will drop in one day and say, I went to my neighbor's house and they have done this and they have done that, and then you're stuck. You are wondering, what do I do now? This model seems so beautiful, I don't want to really go around changing anything here, and suddenly out of the blue, just in time something changes, and you need to now start worrying about the properties of that material which you had never even thought was even remotely important. The last one is also probably well discussed in areas like MVC framework and all, model view controller framework, and the way the designs are created in software, but I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here. So this question is that, do we really still continue talking about architecture as a set of views, like here are the plans, sections, elevations, and go, let's make that building over there? But you have just taken certain views and somebody has to then reconstruct the model back from those views. I think it is important to start asking questions like, do we really even need technical drawings? I have used that a couple of times where there were never any drawing. I just gave it to some simple people, actually, the people who make, we have something called grills, the iron work outside the window to protect from theft and all that. So these people have got these welding machines, and they have got small little shanties at the side of the road where they start their workshop, and you can go to them and make that grill for your window and all. So I actually got such people to make a furniture, and what did they get? They didn't get any drawing. They just got my laptop lying around somewhere, and I told them, you press these keys and you'll get the dimensions of the member which you have to weld. And he welded together all my furniture which my office needed, and he got all the dimensions from there. So this issue about, like, should we really cut up a model into its respective views? I think it is high time that needs to be checked, because that's a legacy which started from Renaissance. And I have this pet peeve about saying, then what the hell, like, I mean, we are not really doing anything different from what the Renaissance people have done. Now, when I was discussing and looking over OS Arc, I'm still halfway through. I still have to see in detail what Topologic is doing. I did see Homemaker in quite a lot of detail, and it's very fascinating to see that. So that is one of the reasons why I made this video. So I have divided this into the way various approaches can be taken to get into the solutions which we can then offer to the world, and what are the set of toolboxes which we have from which we can dip and say, okay, you can choose this and then solve that part of the problem and all. So I have laid down these approaches and these toolboxes. I have not really spoken about software as such, but when I'm explaining this, I will mention a few software. So I broadly divide the approach as linguistics first approach. My approach in that is actually, first let me get the linguistics aspects of our subject, the communication aspects of our subject clear, and then we will talk about the geometry. But there is another approach where people say, okay, let's take the geometry first, and then maybe we can worry about the linguistics. In fact, I've not really seen anybody really looking at the linguistics first approach. But pardon me for pointing out something very obvious. The whole field of computing started with linguistics, right? I mean, when Alan Turing was to solve the problem of the Enigma machine, it was a linguistic challenge. You have to have in that machine certain symbolic systems, which then put together with the right kind of grammar and predicates and the various phraseologies which people use would then solve the problem. And that is the essential core reason why computers are there. Even if you go before that and look at the various census which were taken in the US, and they invented some census tallying machines which you can say are crude precursors to computers. Even that was actually a linguistic challenge. In fact, even today, when you look at any computer software, you are essentially dealing, one of the core ingredients is a database, and a database is what? It is a very crude form of a linguistic system. If you follow what Noam Chomsky and Backus and Knorr, a form of talking about computer language, they are very, very sophisticated understanding of how the language works. If you dig a little deeper, you'll find that you can derive various types of databases, whether it is RDBMS or NoSQL databases. All those concepts actually originate from understanding linguistics, and unless that particular device really speaks in a way speak is not the right word, is you write things into that device in the right way. You cannot retrieve back the stuff or perform certain algorithms if it was not deposited first in the right way, right? And this is where I kind of differ from other approaches. I took a linguistics first approach. TAD is a linguistics first approach. It of course has geometrical modeling and all, but that's not really the main forte. I mean, there are some excellent work which is done in geometry. So now if you go into geometry, you have what I would loosely divide as generative approaches and non-generative approaches. And under generative approach, you have pre-generative. That means before the design is done, you are generating things and trying out various things. And I think Bruno's work is over there. You have, from what I know from various conferences which I have attended, there is this shape grammar approach where you have this formalism called a grammar of a building. I think they had made a grammar for the Roman Palladio buildings. Though Bruno in his talk was talking about that, like maybe his approach may not satisfy that. But I think he should take a look at shape grammars. You will find that there are some very interesting works. This has all been discussed in, I think, last 10 years. Whichever conference you go to, there will definitely be one paper on shape grammar. And then there are genetic and evolutionary methods, which is the direction which Bruno took. I was really fascinated looking at the work which he has done. It's really pretty interesting and has got a lot of potential. But I'll come to that from this linguistics manner later on. But let me not digress right now. Post-generative is when after design is done, so you seed the design with certain starting points, and then you let the system start working out various other alternatives in a generative manner. This is not the same as parametric, this thing that I am put under non-generative here. And you could possibly have mixed mode where you kind of interrupt the auto generation and do some abductive logic and reshape it and then bring it back into the evolutionary cycles and then again interrupt it and so on and so forth. So that could be a mixed mode method of working out a design. The non-generative approach has been the tradition. So if you were to look at it from historical perspective, what has happened so far is that we've got solutions which are geometry first approach, which are non-generative and non-parametric. This is what basically a 3D modeling system like say 3ds Max or SketchUp or any of those kind of software would be fitting into. It is not really parametric as such. But of course, many of them, including TAD, actually has got parametric components in it, where you describe the geometry all right, but then the parameters of that geometry becomes manipulatable, and therefore you can continuously rework the parameters on certain preconditions which you can set, and then it will reshape itself based on the parameters which you provide. It is not the same as generative geometry. Generative geometry is a complete thing, and again you have a mixed mode. So nowadays a lot of software are mixed mode, where if you want you can actually lovingly craft a 3D model using all kind of graphics capability which that software has, and then you also have parameterization if you so need for certain parts, and this seems to be the direction many people are doing. I think Blender is in this category right now. It is I don't think there will ever be a pure parametric system, completely parametric. It will usually be ending up as a mixed mode way of talking about 3D graphics. Now, what are the toolboxes which are available? There's a lot of insights into topology, which is I think what Topologic and others are doing. Even I am got certain topological characteristic in what I have providing. There is this insights into graph theory and all kinds of algorithms on graph theory. I mean, there's plenty of work which is now going on, and there's a lot of theoretical framework behind it. The famous mathematician, what's his name? I forget his name. An Hungarian fellow who's they call it some number, no? Anyway, let me not digress. Okay, it'll come to me later. So then there are lots of insights in AI and ML and machine learning, and I was quite fascinated to see now there's an attempt to put a large collection of 3D objects. I forget what that GitHub project is called. They have some millions of objects which they have harvested from places like some online Onshape. I think they have taken data from onshape.com and put together a huge collection of 3D geometries, which you can later on use it for certain machine learning exercises. Then you have the classic problem of the soft AI approach or the hard AI approach and all that. There are some interesting lessons there which people are getting into. There's a whole lot of geometry toolbox. I don't think I am the expert in explaining this. I think Topologic did a pretty nice explanation of manifold and non-manifold. Of course, there are issues of non-Euclidean geometry, Euclidean geometry, and a lot of insights over there and lots of material over there on what you can, use as a toolbox and take things from there and then adopt it for your particular software. The part which I want to add, which I'm not seeing much discussion, is there's a lot of linguistics insights. Linguistic insight, like I'm fascinated by Jacques Derrida, the linguist. Jacques Derrida is also sometimes considered as a philosopher, but I don't agree. I think he is a pathetic philosopher if he ever was. I think he himself rebelled against being labeled as a philosopher, though he did study philosophy. But his contribution in post-structuralist linguistics is very, very fascinating. And those of you who are not aware of his work, you take a look at his opinions on logocentrism and what he calls as difference. He's invented a neologism there. Difference is a combination of differ and defer, and very crudely it is like a infinite set of xrefs in AutoCAD. Like, so you xref something in AutoCAD, then you find that xref itself has got another xref, and that xref has got another xref, and therefore it never really ends. And he says that in language, when we are describing certain things, you can never really fully describe it because it's always referring to something else all the time. And that's what this post-structuralist theory. The structuralist theory was what Saussure and other linguists spoke about, where everything is very a bat is a bat because it's not a cat or a mat or a chair or whatever, and therefore it is a bat. So it is like by identifying the structural system of various words and various symbols, but that is, I think, pretty naive, and I think the post-structuralists did not fully reject structuralism. And this actually has got a lot of insights and usefulness on how we construct our internal database, especially something like architecture, architectural process, where the data continuously keeps changing. And there's a lot of discrete maths which is possible, and one of the areas in which we architects who are involved in computing should really dig into would be things like radiology, where they have, they take the messy geometry inside a body and then put that up into real small little voxels, and then they can do a lot of clever things with that. So I see a lot of toolbox emerging from their work, which can be brought into our work and use. So if you talk about a really messy piece of architecture, say a hut which is constructed out of cartons and all, I mean we cannot sit down and say that's not architecture, because that is also architecture. Or some mud architecture where the geometry is not really so clearly defined. Maybe this voxel or radiology approach would probably produce a lot more accurate work, which may serve even those type of buildings, and pretty accurate buildings also, pretty geometrically deterministic buildings also. So this is the map which I've got so far, and I'm sure there are glaring points which are missing. This was done over a day after I was looking at and introspecting on whatever I learned whatever I read at osarc.com, and obviously this is a work in progress. I invite any of you who who are interested in this to come, just email me at this particular email address, and I'll add you into the list of collaborators into this document. And maybe you can add many more things into this, or you can add additional notes here if you have not yet done that, and all those notes will start appearing. So this can be a living document which gives you a lay of the land of where we are and what is the direction in which we are going ahead. Now TAD is very clearly here right now, and I am of course not saying that because you use a linguistic first approach doesn't mean that you would not talk about geometry at all. TAD has got pretty sophisticated ways of handling geometry, and it'll got more also, which I have not yet revealed because it's still on the anvil. Similarly, people who are using geometry first approach, it's not to say that they will never have any linguistic aspects which can be later on used for communication. These are just convenient classification. Of course, there will be blurred boundaries there. I'm sure something about non-Euclidean geometry will have something to say about soft AI, for all you know. Or linguistics will have something about parametric geometry. Of course, those kind of connections would also be there, and there would be some parts which will be a lot more. So this is the entire mind map which I have developed so far, and as I keep reading about what people are doing on OSR.com, I will add more into this and flesh it all out so that you have one consistent where am I kind of direction in this. I hope it helps everybody. I hope I am reasonably unbiased. I'm sure I'm pretty biased because of the work which I've done. And so I invite all of you, those of you who have not tried out TAD, please do so at teamtad.com. It's free, and I have certain condition. The only condition is that you have to join the registration. I mean, you have to register at our community, and one of the reasons for the registration is because TAD actually stamps your username as a DRM, digital rights management, of your data which you produce. So it's actually for your protection, also for your protection of your data. So there you have it. This is what I've done so far. I hope it is useful. Thank you very much.